Hurt people hurt people. What that means is that people who cause pain to others are deeply in pain themselves. And this is very difficult to see from the outside, especially when you're the person who gets hurt. If you're the victim of someone being rude to you, dismissive, mean, judgmental, or knowingly malicious, it is very difficult to remember this fact that the person who did that to you is in some way also experiencing some kind of pain, oftentimes invisible to you or indescribable to you. People lash out or act out from a lens that has been put in place because of the pain that they're already feeling. Think about it. When you're hungry, you tend to get a little hangry, meaning you can be kind of cranky and lash out at somebody in your life. And the hardest thing to remember about all this, while you're in the thick of it, is that it's not about you. It's often not personal. Many people cause pain intentionally, and that certainly comes from a place of pain as well. But the many times people cause pain unintentionally, we interpret it as intentional. But it might not be. When people are in a lot of pain, discomfort, loneliness, sadness, heartbreak, feeling betrayed, whatever it is, they can interpret the actions of others through that lens, and it feels different. If you yourself are feeling in pain, it is hard to see why the person has acted the way that they did, because it seems malicious. It's easy for us to interpret it as malicious. In fact, humans love the good versus bad framing. If someone hurts us, that means they're a bad person. Why do we seem to interpret the world this way in black and white? It's often found that there are no good people and bad people, and they are distinct groups, and no good people ever do bad things, and no bad people ever do good things. This is not the way that human nature operates, right? All it takes for a good person to hurt someone else is for that good person to be in some kind of pain or distress themselves. So the reason we look at the world in this simplified binary way is because it makes life easier to understand. It makes the complexity of other humans' behaviors and actions something that we can digest and put into a category really easily, like, that person is an asshole. But is it ever true that that person is fully and completely an asshole all the time? Probably not. So their actions come from a different place, a different reasoning that we are unable to see typically. We have to infer, or we have to ask. And oftentimes it's not safe or even worthwhile to ask. But it also helps put you, the person suffering, the victim, in the category of good. So when you have the world divided into good people and bad people, and you point out like, that person's an asshole, that's a bad person, what they're doing is wrong, you find yourself in a state of judgment of them, then by default, you've put yourself into the good category, right? Like, I'm not like them. I'm not an asshole. I'm not a jerk. I don't purposely hurt people. Therefore, I'm a good person. And we all want to believe that about ourselves. In fact, a lot of people who hurt others actually do genuinely believe that about themselves. And many times in our lives, if you have the humility to look back on moments in your life where you've caused other people pain, especially unintentionally, you might have thought you were in the right? You might have thought, well, I'm suffering and what I'm doing is justified. And there's a whole internal set of reasoning as to why you do that. And it makes sense to you because it's your own mental process. But to the person that you may have hurt, they don't see it. It doesn't make sense to them. They don't get where you're coming from. People who are in pain transfer their pain onto others, like they lash out, they hurt someone else, as a response to their inability to process their own internal pain. They're either unwilling or unable, they don't have the tools or the emotional awareness or the support system to take a look at what it is that is hurting inside them and process it, deal with it in a healthy way. And therefore, they project it, they make it somebody else's problem, or they hurt someone else in order to make themselves feel better. And it may be a short-term band-aid. It's sort of like when bullies put other people down in an effort to raise themselves up. They're not aware that that's why they're doing it. And oftentimes the victim of the bully is not aware of it either. But it's sort of a short-term feeling of superiority. Like, if I can put you down, then I have some power over you. Like, I have been able to affect your emotions, and therefore I am a powerful person. I am more empowered because of what I did. But it's not true empowerment, it's not true healing, and it's not true status improvement. But people who are emotionally immature or underdeveloped will gravitate towards actions like that because that's all that makes sense in the short term. It doesn't require further analysis. And that's hard work. That's something that we all have to do in our lives to grow, to become emotionally robust, mature, self-actualized people. When people are completely in their pain and they're suffering and they're hurting and the world feels unjust against what happened to them, they're unable to see the pain of others. They are often unaware of the consequences of their own actions on others. Like I was saying, you may have felt justified in what you did. You may have hurt someone and been completely blind to what you did or said to them. And oftentimes, when people hurt us, we interpret that they are fully aware of what they did, right? But oftentimes, they are not aware of the way that they hurt you or how deeply they hurt you or why you're hurting. Because in their minds, to them, there's internal consistency to the reasoning of the actions that they just did. But again, we're not privy to that. We don't see it. So for example, if you think about someone who is rude to a customer service person, they may actually be feeling frustration with the problem they're having that they need customer service for. Maybe they're feeling powerlessness or stupid, that they're unable to fix the problem themselves. Maybe they're experiencing pressure from an external deadline or something, and it's making them feel inadequate, that they can't get something done in time. Think about when someone is mean to you during a breakup. They're experiencing heartbreak. They're coming from a place of pain, and it may be very clear in that moment, but the things that they say may feel like terrible jabs, things that cut really deep and are very personal to you. But it's the sense of rejection that they're speaking from, and rejection is very painful. And so there's a bit of transference that they're trying to do. They're trying to even the playing field. I'm hurting, you should hurt too. Or your rejection that you've done to me is so terrible, and I am so wounded that what I say in response to it is a product of that, and it is deserved because you are so awful, you are a bad person because you are hurting me, right? It's this binary, super simplified, easy to act upon framing of the world, of the way that people behave. But people who are in pain deserve compassion. We know this, right? We see somebody who's injured, somebody who's starving, somebody who's had an unjust thing happen to them from their government or whatever. And we're like, wow, I feel such compassion for them. How terrible that they're hurting, that they're suffering in this way. And that's easy for us to wrap our minds around. But the next step is acknowledging that people who hurt others, people who cause injury, people who do mean or bad or demeaning or insulting things are themselves in pain. Therefore, they too deserve compassion. This is the biggest leap for people. It requires being humble, setting aside your ego, and being fully present with the experience of someone else, and that takes an elevated skill of empathy. You have to really be able to dive into what's going on inside them. Where are they coming from? What is the point? What is the state of mind that they're in that causes them to act the way that they do, or sets the stage for them to choose to act the way they do? Now, I was told a lot as a kid to feel sorry for the bully. You know, when people are dealing with another person in their peer group, in their sphere of social circles, who is cruel to them, who is mean and insulting and unfair and maybe humiliates or physically hurts you. And there's a message that like, oh, you need to feel sorry for the bully because they're the ones hurting inside. Like they're the ones who are insecure and they're putting you down as a way to raise themselves up. But this never sat well with me. I think it felt dismissive of my own feelings. And because I felt injured by the bully, right? And the last thing I want to do is have compassion for the person who hurt me. I'm suffering. Now I'm a person in pain too, just like the bully. And maybe that makes the bully feel less alone, or maybe makes their pain feel less because they're better at hiding it than the pain that I'm feeling. But compassion does not mean that what they did to you is okay. Compassion does not mean that it justifies their actions in any way. Compassion does not mean that you can have automatic forgiveness and immediate repaired trust. It does not mean that you have to agree with their point of view. It does not mean that you have to like them or even keep them in your life. Compassion is simply, I see that you're hurting. I understand that your actions are because of that pain or discomfort or loneliness or abandonment. Whatever that form of the pain may be, it is under the umbrella of suffering, right? And therefore, To acknowledge where they're at and where they're coming from will give you a greater sense of peace and understanding about its effects on you. And then you can act accordingly in whatever way you need to. But I bet that your actions will change based on your understanding of the situation and the root cause of the other person's actions. Hurt people will hurt other people. It's a sad truth, but the cycle stops when somebody in the process begins to heal and have compassion.